Good evening and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. We begin tonight in Nova Scotia, where a 6-day manhunt came to an end over the weekend. A manhunt was triggered last Monday after a Mi'kmaq man allegedly stabbed a police officer in the neck. Police were responding to a domestic dispute call at a hotel in Bridgewater, an hour outside of Halifax. Tobias Charles Doucette evaded authorities until early Sunday morning after a tip led police to him.
And around 12:50 this morning is when they made contact and arrested Mr. Doucette without incident. As soon as he was arrested, he was turned over to two Indigenous members for the RCMP and taken into custody and taken to the Cookville detachment.
Today, Doucette was formally charged with attempted murder, 3 counts of assault, injuring a police animal, possession of a weapon, mischief, and car theft. A group of Nova Scotians held a rally today demanding a public inquiry into the deadly mass shooting that killed 22 people back in April.
Make sure you keep speaking up and demanding this inquiry and keep fighting for transparency and justice. People
in Halifax walked off their jobs for 22 minutes in honor of the 22 victims who were killed. Today's rally comes less than a week after the province unveiled plans to create a panel review into the Portapique massacre. But critics say it's not enough and they want a full public inquiry. On Friday, BC public health officials declared a COVID-19 outbreak on Haida Gwaii. Northern Health confirmed 13 cases in a community on the island. They say all the cases are linked. The initial transmission is being investigated, but it is believed that it was from a resident that traveled off-island and then returned. All the people that have tested positive are at home self-isolating. Health officials and the First Nations Health Authority are working with local leadership to coordinate a response and provide medical support. Nunavut Premier Joseph Iqaluit was back in Iqaluit today for the first time since he revealed he had taken a trip to Manitoba and was able to self-isolate afterwards at his cabin. The Premier went to Manitoba to retrieve his float plane, which he then flew directly to his cabin to spend 14 days in isolation. Most Nunavumians have to spend those 14 days in a medical quarantine hotel. Previously, the Premier had urged Nunavut residents to avoid non-essential travel. The Premier was asked, given the same choice, would he make the same decision?
Yes, I would. It was a calculated risk, and I said, and I'll own it, and I'll speak to it. Any questions I get asked. I applied for isolation dump. I could have applied for exemption, and I may have got it, but everyone does their 14 days, and I wanted to make sure I was safe to keep Nunavut safe.
We reported a hunger strike by inmates at the Ottawa Carleton Detention Centre last week. It was the second strike in as many months, and APTN has learned that it has now ended. Jamie Pashagumscum reports this from Ottawa.
Ontario Solicitor General would not offer any details except to confirm that the hunger strike is now over. It was initiated by a reported 70 inmates last Tuesday who refused to eat. The hunger strike ended on Sunday. Inmates at the same facility were involved in another hunger strike last month, demanding healthier food and hygiene products to help protect them from COVID-19. An advocacy group called the Criminalization and Punishment Education Project reported that inmates renewed the hunger strike last week because their demands from June still have not been met. In a statement last week, the Office of the Solicitor General said the jail's food is up to national standards and extra food is available for sale to inmates. And they do provide hygiene and cleaning products so inmates can clean their cells. But multiple inmates had previously told APTN that those products are sometimes withheld by guards as a form of punishment. A rally was held on Friday outside the jail in solidarity with the hunger strikers. APTN asked the Solicitor General's office for more details on the hunger strike, such as confirmation of how many inmates are involved and whether their demands are being met, but did not receive a response in time for this newscast. Jamie Pashagumscum, APTN National News, Ottawa.
It's time for a short break, but still to come, women leaders making strides. A university in British Columbia appoints its first Indigenous female chancellor. Beginning on the East Coast, 28 in Charlottetown and 29 in rain in Fredericton. 12 degrees in Nain and 18 in Happy Valley Goose Bay. 27 in Quebec City, and 23 in Val-d'Or. 27 and a mix of sun and cloud in Peterborough, and 23 in Sault Ste. Marie. 23 in Timmins, and 19 in Wawa. 20 degrees and rain in God's Lake, and 27 in the Pas. 26 in Gimli, and 26 in Winnipeg. 30 degrees and sun in Regina, and 31 degrees and sun in North Battleford. 28 and a mix of sun and cloud in Stony Rapids, and 29 in La Ronge. A university in British Columbia will make history this fall when the province's first Indigenous female chancellor assumes office. APTN's Sarah Connors takes a look at the new chancellor's triumphs and tribulations and how they've led to her most recent success.
Kim Baird will make history this fall when she becomes chancellor of Kwantlen Polytechnique University. It's KPU's first time bestowing the prestigious honor to an Indigenous person. It's also a first for British Columbia. When Baird becomes chancellor on October 5th, she'll be the first Indigenous woman ever to hold the title in the province.
I hope to do the role justice, and I hope I can be a good role model for youth and others who don't have things figured out necessarily, right? So yeah, it is a huge honor, and it does feel good to be the first both woman and Indigenous person in that role.
A KPU alumni, Baird is best known for being the former chief of Tsawwassen First Nation from 1999 to 2012. During her tenure, she oversaw the first modern treaty in BC, which led Tsawwassen to greater self-government and economic development. Now in business for herself as a consultant, Baird credits her success to KPU.
I got an Associate of Arts there, and it actually awoke my political consciousness and led me on the path I am now to advancing a land claim for my community.
But Baird's path to success wasn't easy. She attended 8 schools before graduating high school and witnessed family violence and alcoholism as a child.
Really didn't see a future for myself, didn't have a lot of hope. So when I graduated high school, it was kind of surprising that I did, because I was completely disillusioned and all that kind of stuff, but I had a lot of community support and almost a pressure, I think, to do something.
Now, she hopes to use her achievements and her own experiences to encourage Indigenous youth to pursue higher education. And she hopes her new role can be used to bring attention to Indigenous issues.
I hope to use the role to advance Indigenous reconciliation for KPU specifically, but to convene discussions amongst post-secondary institutions more broadly. If I can use my capacity to convene important discussions about the way forward in Canada, I think it'd be a good use of the role.
And as a mother to 3 school-age daughters, her dream is for them to someday become strong leaders of their own.
These are all important small steps in this country, and I'm excited for my daughter's future too.
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Richmond.
More female bosses, more profits. At least that's what new research from the United Kingdom says. Researchers say boards which are at least 1/3 female garner 10 times the profits of those without. They looked at London-listed companies. Only 14 out of 350 businesses were led by women, while 15% had no female executives. The research group said more women in decision-making roles lets companies understand their customers better. It's time for one more break, but still to come, we'll have an encore presentation of how members from a community in BC are dealing with COVID-19 after going through the Spanish flu 100 years ago. And here's a preview of a story from Yellowknife. Stay tuned.
There's noticeable changes on the land in Jean Marie River, Northwest Territories. Permafrost slumps, forest fires, and warmer water all threaten a way of life. But how these known changes are being interpreted lies in the hands of one dedicated community member.
At that time, there was a possibility of the Mackenzie gas pipeline going through, and that it's going to be impacting our traditional lands.
That story coming up tomorrow on APTN National News.
Moving over to the western coast now, 24 in High Level and 26 in Peace River. 31 in Sun and Red Deer and 35 in Medicine Hat. 34 in Kamloops and 26 in Campbell River. 25 in a mix of sun and cloud in Fort Nelson and 23 in Smithers. 15 in Rock River and 15 in Whitehorse. 23 in a mix of sun and cloud in Yellowknife and 23 in sun in Fort Simpson. 22 in Fort McPherson and 18 in Colville Lake. 21 in Baker Lake and 19 in sun in Chesterfield. 10 degrees in Clyde River and 16 in Iqaluit. Welcome back. The COVID-19 virus is making a comeback in Quebec, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and British Columbia. But what about pandemics of the past? This story by Tamara Pimentel first aired last May. In it, she hears from elders from a community that was hit hard by the Spanish flu 100 years ago.
At a time like this, Elder Sam Aku picks up his drum and sings this healing song.
I've been singing this song the last couple weeks. This terrible sickness that hit our people all over around the world.
His home of Doig River First Nation in northeastern BC is shut down. Traditional gatherings cancelled. Here there is one confirmed case of COVID-19, and the community is waiting for the results of other tests. When the news hit, fear rippled through Doig that this will be a repeat of 100 years ago. The people of Doig River are part of the Daneza tribe, or the Beaver Indians. The Spanish flu in 1918 hit the tribe hard, wiping out 85% of the people. These mass burial sites are scattered throughout the territory in northern BC and Alberta. Some speak of the Beaver Indians as people of the past, but they still live in this region and haven't forgotten the stories passed on.
When the Spanish flu hit this area, it wiped out a lot of people. People talk about in the future, the people will turn this soil upside down. That's when the nature will attack. So I believe the nature is attacking us today.
My dad survived through there.
Billy Atachi still shares stories of his father and how he survived the pandemic by living off the land. He says it's a lesson that can be learned in today's pandemic.
They say, stay home, stay in the house, don't go nowhere. Stay in the bush, keep going. And that's, don't come back. You'll be safer in the bush than stay in the house.
Nearly 4,000 Indigenous people across the country were killed by the Spanish flu. In northern Saskatchewan, on the Cumberland House Cree Nation, Elder Mary Louise McKenzie says those who stayed in communities didn't often survive.
I used to hear my dad talk about it, and he said he used to go out cutting wood for them, and he said sometimes I'd find them all dead.
Aku says it's important that these tight-knit communities take the COVID-19 pandemic seriously.
I think that's the only way to survive is keep your distance. I hope it don't last forever, but like right now, I would like to walk up to people and shake people's hand. You can't do that anymore. So how would anybody feel if you are not careful, and then you catch it and then give it to your loved one, and then your loved one end up dying? How would you feel?
When restrictions on physical distancing are lifted, Aku says Doig River will hold its ceremonies again and pass down stories and songs to help younger generations get through the tough times.
After we're gone, who's going to sing it for people and who's going to tell the stories. So it's very important to pass it on to next generations. In the past, many years ago, people saying there'll be sickness that will come. It don't have no cure. It's here today.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, on the Doig River First Nation.
There are many communities across the north deeply rooted in traditional culture and guided by protocol passed on from generation to generation. Charlotte Moore Jacobs looked into one Sawtoo community known for its emphasis on spirituality. Here's an encore presentation of that story, which first aired in February.
The doors are always open to the Prophet's house.
I feel connected along with all those photos of the elders. That's May month, the one with the Christmas tree. And
Candace Ferdinand comes here during prayer to center herself. Ferdinand recently graduated as a social worker and wants to help others. The key to healing? Root oneself in traditional knowledge and spirituality.
Yeah, dinegudi, beta fagud sendira. And what that means is, like, we survive so long. Before you start telling stories, make sure you know it well before you say it.
Delaney is home to roughly 530 Satugotne Dene who live on the western shores of Great Bear Lake. In 1825, colonizer Sir John Franklin introduced Christianity. About 100 years later, a man from Ray, NWT, named Ea, became one of 4 modern prophets in the area. He gave more than 30 prophecies to the people of Delaney between 1857 and 1940. His spiritual guidance is respected protocol.
He was the one that taught the people about the next life, but then he also talked about how you should respect people.
Mandy Bea is an activist and knowledge holder in Delaney. She says her community is spiritual because they follow the Dene laws defined by love, unity, and justice.
And I think that really has a lot to do with our ancestors really went through a lot of hardships to survive, especially in such a harsh, cold climate. So I think every day you're sort of walking that balance of sort of between life and death quite often.
Like many here, she says Dene knowledge is holistic and interconnected with the land. There is a well-attended spiritual gathering that brings people from across the north into Delaney annually. It honors Dene tradition, culture, and community. Still, there is a prevalent Christian influence here. Many community members are devout Roman Catholic. But the ones APTN spoke with said religion is not seen as a competition, but just another spiritual practice and a personal decision. Bea and her kids follow the worn-down path her grandfather walked daily. It leads to the Roman Catholic Church.
I asked an elder from my community here. There's so many different religions, and we see this all the time. We have one in our a big religion in our communities up in the north is the Roman Catholic religion, but you also have the Protestants, and there's all kinds of different religions in the world. And so I'm like, well, which one is right? Like, how do you know which one is the right one to follow? And it was a really beautiful and simple explanation. He kind of thought about it for a second, and he's like, if I wanted to go to Toledo, which is just down the river here, he's like, I can take a boat, I can walk, I can fly. There's many different ways of getting to Toledo. There's different methods to use to get to Toledo. But in the end, we're all going, and religion's the same way, we're all going to the same place, but there's just a different method of getting there.
In 2015, Delaney signed a first-of-its-kind deal with Canada for self-government. Much like the Dene teachings of tolerance, Delaney will not be told and not tell others how to worship, nor do they need to be told to. They always have, and most likely always will. Charlotte Moore Jacobs, APTN National News, Delaney.
Celebrated Mi'kmaq filmmaker Jeff Barnaby's latest film is about a pandemic that sweeps the world. No, it's not a documentary. It's a zombie film with a twist. where Indigenous people are immune to the plague brought by the invading masses. Here's a look back at this story, first filed by Tom Fenario last April.
At face value, Blood Quantum hits all the requisite zombie film tropes. Blood, guts, screams. It's a brutal trip into the survival of the fictional Red Crow Reserve against invasion. But as director Jeff Barnaby sees it, any apocalypse where Indigenous people have the upper hand can't be all bad.
That's my philosophy as an extreme filmmaker. Nothing I can put on screen will ever be worse than what we survived.
Barnaby says with Blood Quantum, he wanted to bring back a healthy dose of social commentary to the zombie genre. In the film, the Indigenous characters are immune to a plague that turns the rest of the world into the living dead. They spend much of the film warding off invading zombies from the nearby settler town.
As much as it's aimed at colonialism, I think there's a bit of a critique, not even a bit of a critique, but a pretty explicit critique on the post-colonial Native person too, the colonial Indian who seems to think that because they've been treated badly, that in turn gives them prescience to treat other people badly.
The film uses images that reflect famous photos of the 1990 Oka crisis.
I hadn't heard that we were being raided that day.
And by setting Blood Quantum in 1981, Barnaby is making a reference to the year his home community of Listagouche First Nation was raided by Quebec provincial police over a salmon fishing dispute, a point he drives home by filming on the same bridge where some of his fellow community members were arrested.
That bridge, really the first bridge synonymous with a blockade, is the bridge that you see in the opening credits of Blood Quantum.
Blood Quantum had its theatrical release canceled because of COVID-19, but it will be available to rent or own across all digital platforms as of April 28th. Depending on who you talk to, releasing a zombie film during a real-life pandemic is either a drag or good marketing.
Plan on the pandemic part of any of this. That was just like a happy coincidence.
Jokes aside, Barnaby is disappointed the film won't get to be seen in cinemas. Blood Quantum comes 7 years after his breakthrough first feature, Rhymes for Young Ghouls, and well over a decade after he first started pitching the project. Barnaby wishes there was more support for not only Indigenous filmmakers, but genre films as well.
Let's be honest, Canada puts out some pretty boring movies. And these guys that make these boring movies keep getting to make them, or they move into television and then they get to make their mediocre shit there. Why can't a Native person exist in that same level of privilege, I guess? I don't know.
That hasn't stopped Barnaby from writing his next feature, which he describes as a psychological horror road trip through a post-apocalyptic world.
So that's what I'm still doing what I'm doing. I'm still flirting with horror, and I'm still trying to get asses in seats. I mean, that's basically the Jeff Barnaby formula.
Tom Fenario, APTN National News, Montreal.
That's been your look at APTN National News for this Monday. For news anytime, you can visit us at aptnnews.ca. I'm Gerald Stranger. Have a great night.